So, Russian hackers are once again targeting American elections, this time in the midterms. According to the Daily Beast forensic analysis and Microsoft, the Russian intelligence agency GRU has tried to attack the re-election campaign of Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. The attempt against McCaskill's office was a variant of the password stealing technique used by Russia's so-called fancy bear hackers against Clinton's campaign chairman John Podesta in 2016. The hackers sent forged notification emails to Senate targets, claiming the target's Microsoft Exchange password had expired and instructing them to change it. If the target clicked on the link, he or she was taken to a convincing replica of the U.S. Senate's Active Directory Federation Services, ADFC login page, a single sign-on point for email and other services. Right, so this is just a standard phishing email. Change your password. My mom calls me about it all the time. The Daily Beast found this out while investigating statements made by Microsoft VP Tom Burt last week in an appearance at the Aspen Security Forum, in which he said, "We did discover that a fake Microsoft domain had been established as the landing page for phishing attacks, and we saw metadata that suggested those phishing attacks were being directed at 3 candidates who are all standing for elections in the midterms." We know about one, Claire McCaskill of Missouri, Democratic senator. Of course, we can only assume the other 2 are also
Republicans, right?
Well, we don't, yeah, they're probably Republicans, just to be fair. So in October, this is more about Microsoft, they wrested control of one of the spoof website addresses, adfc.senate.gov.info. Seizing the Russians' malicious domain names has been easy for Microsoft since August 2017. Would have been helpful a year earlier, when a federal judge in Virginia issued a permanent injunction against the GRU hackers after Microsoft successfully sued them as unnamed John Doe defendants. The court established a process that lets Microsoft take over any web addresses the hackers use that include a Microsoft trademark. Of course, McCaskill responded, and well, I don't have a response, but I will say McCaskill has been historically very critical of Russia and has been supportive of the Russia investigation. She's considered to be one of the most vulnerable Senate Democrats as well, facing re-election this year as Republicans hope to hold their slim majority in the Senate. So yeah, she called Putin a thug and a bully and called Russian election meddling a form of warfare. So it makes sense that she would be targeted by the GRU, right. And it makes sense that, listen, if it worked once, you would probably try it again and again, and we've been warned that this might happen, and now we have at least one case of it, if not 3, in which it is happening.
So yeah, McCaskill said, look, we'll give you more information next week when we're allowed to, but yes, we were targeted, and so the government confirms that. Of course, Donald Trump's going around tweeting, the Russians will probably want to help the Democrats. Well, so far, no. Shockingly enough, it turns out that they think the Republicans are much easier to manipulate and to buy off and to work for the Russian government instead of our own government. So here's yet another Democrat they've targeted. The other 2 we don't know yet, but the government knows, so those names will be released. And if it turns out Trump was right, you'll find out. Maybe next week. And hey, it turns out the Russians really like a couple of Democrats. But my guess is if history holds, it'll be Republicans that they are trying to help because the Republicans are more pro-Russian government. And in the case of Trump and that famous press conference and in almost all of his actions, more pro-Russian government than the US government. So they think the Republicans are easy to turn into traitors, apparently.
There's always the talk when people say, certain, especially as a president, you shouldn't do things to aid and comfort your enemies and doing things. And a lot of times you just think, okay, yeah, it's supposed to feel good and sound good for Americans. You're not supposed to say anything it's against America. There's that whole thing where they say, if a president travels overseas, don't talk bad about him while he's overseas. And I've always thought, why do we care? You've talked bad about him when he's at home versus when he's overseas. What's the difference? You're talking bad about him. He's your president, right? And this has been like historic. This is one of those times when those things that are said, like you don't want to aid and comfort your enemies, and also speak out against your intelligence agency, also say that none of these things are happening, also that there was no interest in Russia in doing this, which he's been doing since he was elected, since before he was elected. So this in real time, we're finding out how that works. So now they'll continue to do it because you've continued to provide them this aid and comfort. So now they can go right in. And then people say, oh, who cares? It's Claire McCaskill. I want Trump to keep his numbers with the Senate anyway, so it's okay. Now that aid has led to you supporting this kind of a subversion of our political system. Now you're supporting a foreign agency doing things like this. And as long as it's in your favor, Republicans are okay with it. That's how suddenly you've changed your brain from thinking, hey, let's support America, rah, rah, USA, to who cares? It's just that part of America.
And that's, I think, the scariest part to me about all of this, no matter where you stand. And I know there's a lot of skeptics on the left and the right when it comes to how much Russia did or did not interfere. I don't know how, I don't know why. Despite all of the evidence, there's still skeptics, and that's fine. I think my problem is what you're saying, Jayar, is how Congress has politicized this so much to the point where, like, we have to rely on Microsoft. Like, thank you, Microsoft, for helping us. When it's like, actually, shouldn't senators' offices be equipped with those tools to be able to prevent these kinds of phishing attacks and have more robust cybersecurity on all fronts? I don't mean like, oh, so we can attack Iran's nuclear, whatever. Or I don't mean cyber warfare. I mean cybersecurity, right? And I think it's important for those of us on the left and progressives to kind of be like, we can hold these two things at the same time. We don't have to politicize this. We can sort of defend getting smarter and being better all around.
I think just what's so fascinating about this to me is that while the president is on international television saying there's no way Russia did have anything to do with this, that they are still currently doing it, like literally at that time while he's talking.
Yeah, and in fact, he was asked by a reporter, hey, are the Russians still actively engaged in cyber warfare against us and interfering? And he said no. And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders had to come out and say he meant yes when he said no. And then later they changed their mind again, and Trump called it a hoax, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders came out and said, oh, the whole investigation is a hoax, there's nothing going on. Now, I want to give credit to some Republicans, let's be fair. Okay, so Dan Coates is a huge right-wing Republican, former senator, and he's the director of national intelligence, and he's like, they're definitely interfering there. And it's not just a pass, he said right now, in 2018, their interference is pervasive and significant and active, okay? So he is on the right side of this. He has all the information. He's the director of national intelligence. Lindsey Graham, Trey Gowdy, those guys. Now, I can't stand their policies. They want to get us into a war with Iran. So we have our disagreements, which is like 98% of what I think of those guys. But here they say, yes, the Russians are clearly interfering. We've seen the intelligence is true. On the other hand, there are Republicans like Donald Trump who go, wait, are they helping me? Totally fine. I blame Dan Coates. I blame my own director of national intelligence. I blame my own FBI. I think Putin's right. That's why they called it the Treason Summit when he said all that stuff in Helsinki. And then you've got the House Freedom Caucus. So the Jim Jordans and the Mark Meadows and the Matt Gaetz going around saying, who's investigating Trump? Let's fire him, let's impeach him. How dare they, right? And those are the brown shirts. So there is a range of different Republicans and their reactions here. And to be, I don't know why I'm being fair, but to be fair, because that's what we do.
Right,
Right?
But
like, I'll tell you why I say I don't know why I'm being fair in a second too, but to be fair to McCaskill's opponent, look, we don't have no idea that he asked for it. In the case of Trump, he literally said in a press conference during the election, hey, Russians, why don't you get those 30,000 emails of Hillary Clinton? He literally asked for it. In the case of McCaskill's opponent, to the best of our knowledge, he didn't ask the Russians to interfere in the election. And by the way, it might really hurt him, because now if you're in Missouri, are you gonna help the Russians select their candidate for Missouri?
Right, if you weren't paying attention then, you are now.
That's right, so I don't blame that guy for it. The reason why it pains me that we're so goddamn fair to the Republicans and tell you which one's telling the truth, which one isn't, which one's etc. is because they never return the favor. If it was the shoe was on the other foot and the Russians were helping the Democrats, they'd be like, oh, the communists, we knew it. They asked for it, oh my God. Imagine if they were helping McCaskill.
Which, like,
every Republican would not give a damn that McCaskill had nothing to do with it. They would rip her to shreds.
The president would be having a press conference.
Definitely.
Right now.
If you're the GRU, just like, I'm not a spy or a hacker, but like if I was, I'd be like, maybe the other two should be Republicans. The other two of the three accounts that Microsoft says that were most likely hacked or tried to be phished, just to like, just to throw one in for good measure, be like, no, it's not political. See, we hack Republicans too all the time.
But by the way, Francesca, to some degree, they did do that in 2016, and I would be shocked if they didn't do it again.
Right.
So that's part of why I say, look, no matter what, no matter how despicable they are, we gotta be fair in treating these people. So McCaskill's opponent, he didn't ask for it as far as we know, and so and they are trying to cause chaos. And if you're trying to cause chaos and rip this country apart, it would make sense for at some point for them to pick a couple of random Democrats and progressive Democrats more so, right? And go, oh yeah, here, let's hack their Republican opponent. So then the corporate Democrats would rip into the progressive Democrats and we'd have internal wars and you'd have more chaos. And it's not like Putin and the Russians are unsophisticated. They're way smarter than Trump and all those guys. So if you were smart, you probably would do that. That's why they did a little bit in 2016. And unfortunately, probably more to come.
I kind of want to just to continue on this. I think that, yes, I agree with you. There are some Republicans who are doing the right thing. But at the same time, House Republicans last week just blocked basically an appropriations bill introduced by Representative Mike Quigley to add $380 million for election security. That's not the same thing as hacking campaigns, but it is securing and having states feel like they can be more equipped when they're trying to protect the integrity of their elections. And I think it comes down to, I mean, here on TYT and on this show and progressives, we want to get out the vote. It doesn't matter. We don't get out the vote and say, hey, vote Dem, or vote progressive or vote this. No, I mean, I think people have their favorites, but the point is to vote. And I have to say, I don't think that the Republican strategy, when you think as a Republican, is to increase voter turnout. It's not.
The
we all know.
policies go against that completely.
So why would you want to protect? So fundamentally, I'm asking, like, why would Republicans even want to protect election integrity if, when fewer people vote, they win?
It's all part of the same agenda. That's why it works out that way. Also, I mean, it's across the board. Kirstjen Nielsen also, earlier this same month, this happened, Claire McCaskill's hacking happened in 2017.
Right.
But this same month, she came out and said that there's no indication that Russia is targeting the 18 US midterms at a scale or scope to match the activities of 16. So you would take that and go, oh, well, not at the same scale and scope, but it's still happening. So how much do you really care about it? Therefore, then there's those elected officials that can vote things down, like the preemptive laws that they can do, or at least monies they can put to stop these things in the future. Because across the board, they've set a precedent. We don't care because our president doesn't care.
Right. That's what when you were talking about, they've got to make it like less obvious. They don't have to anymore because there are so many people in charge right now publicly saying this is not even happening.
Right.
It's not even a thing. They don't even have to do that anymore.
Yeah, so Jayar is absolutely right. Kirstjen Nielsen saying that it's not a big deal is outrageous.
Yeah.
She's supposed to be the head of Homeland Security. And it seems like the Russians are helping the Republicans, so she's like, whatever. Right. And that is completely unacceptable. And I think the number that they blocked was $250 million extra funding. And that's also completely unacceptable. Why wouldn't you want more secure elections unless you thought a foreign government was going to rig the elections on your behalf? That's outrageous. And that does border on traitorous, right? And by the way, you think the Russians are here to help you. They want chaos, you idiots. At some point, they could also turn on you if you just give them the keys to the elections. And what if you're not guarding the hen house at all? Then the Chinese come in. Do you know who the Chinese are for? The Pakistanis could come in. The Saudis can come in. Well, the Saudis are probably not going to figure it out. But look, but a lot of others can figure out how to get into our elections, and it is an absolute disaster. And last thing is, guys, look. We're progressive. I mean, we call ourselves home progressives. I want progressives to win, right? But we would never push for laws that say, let's make sure Republicans can't vote. Yeah. That's a giant, giant difference. We would never push for, Sri Lanka is on our side. Let Sri Lanka hack the vote.
Right.
That would be unbelievable.
But like also not a bad idea. If you're listening, hackers in Sri Lanka, headline, TYT host calls for Sri Lanka to help Democrats in 2018 midterm. Hey.
Right, so we would fight that with every fiber of our being because we actually care about our democracy. And that's a giant difference.
You actually want what's best even for those voters too. Because you believe in the policies and the things you think would help the country, not just your own interests and pockets. Because actually helping the entire country helps the people that you think they're hoarding all of the power and money to anyway.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.